Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I'd like to briefly explain the differences between a app, a page, a layout, and a view within a Xamarin Forms application. Of course, most of these principles apply to pretty much any mobile app regardless of the packages you're using to develop it, but it definitely applies to Xamarin Forms as well. So at a base level, when you're developing an app, you have, well, the app level of your application. Whenever your app starts and stops, everything else starts and stops. Now, at the app layer, when you're basically creating this app.xaml or app.xaml.cs level of your application, it doesn't have anything to display on its own, but rather it partially serves as a container for what are called pages. And these pages you could kind of think of as a full screen that's basically blank and needs stuff to get added to. So, like a blank screen or one window inside of, let's say, an Android device, probably you're talking about a page at that level. So these pages are giant containers that are allowed to have basically one view inside of it. And generally what you assign as that viewable component is a layout. So the layouts, they can be like a grid where it's like 3 columns and then maybe you have 3 rows. So you would have 9 elements, or 9 spots for elements in total for your layout. And the layout in that case would be called a grid layout, but there's other kinds of layouts like stack layouts. And each of these elements are going to be what's referred to as a view, which is the end of the chain where you have a viewable component that actually pops up on screen. So although the layouts are assigned to pages, and the pages are basically there for the purpose of displaying stuff to your user, it doesn't actually display anything until you get to the view level. So of these, the page level and the layout level are just really for determining how everything's going to look. But then the views, these last things like a button, for instance, are what your user is actually going to see at the end of basically loading the application. So it could be a button, it could also be a text box or a text, just like a text label that gets shown on the screen. Some are editable. I believe they would be called a entry inside of Xamarin Forms, where basically the user can type stuff in here and then maybe when they hit the button something happens. But all of these things, they're what's called views, and they get their position is determined primarily by the layout you choose on the page. And although a page itself can only have one layout assigned to it, you can have layouts within layouts. So you can have like a stack layout at the top level, and then below that you add several different grids that take up different portions of your page. So to kind of show this in action, I have one of my apps booted up. So at this very base level, you have the entire application, which is just everything you see running right now, but none of what's actually being displayed. And this application, for I guess the visual purpose, we could just kind of think of it as the window, and then inside of this window, a standard Windows window, you have the page, which is where it says fake log generator, the background, all of these different views inside of it. That's all part of a single page. And then as for my layout, which is assigned to the page, I believe I have a centered stack layout. So it's centered on the page and it only takes up the amount that it needs to, but it's a stack layout, which means that basically it goes from top to bottom, and it lays out the components in that order. So you have game mode at the top, and normally you would have character role below that. I'll explain that in a minute. And the other different views, like here is a picker, and then we have a checkbox, I believe, and then a button. Now, here you're probably noticing, hey, if it goes top to bottom, then how come the character role view over here, both the text view and the drop-down menu, the picker, is to the right of the game mode ones. Well, the reason for that is I actually have a nested stack layout. So this right around here is a stack layout within a stack layout, and this stack layout is set to be horizontal, so it goes from left to right, and that whole stack layout is one component within the greater stack layout. But outside of that, it does go top to bottom. So let's just go ahead and move on to the second page here. So all of this is one page, and then we basically hit the generate log button, and it transitions us into the next page. Actually, in this case, it adds a new page onto the stack, and then the one on top of the stack is the one that displays. But here is a completely different page. You can see it contains a different layout, it contains different buttons, it also has a toolbar button up there at the top. But this is a completely separate page within the same application. So no matter which page we're on, we're running in the same application, and when I do close the application, obviously, as anybody would know, everything else shuts off. So I hope that's a pretty good introduction to how these things play together and what the difference between an app, a page, a layout, and a view is. So thank you for watching. If this helped you out, feel free to check out my Patreon, and I'll see you in my future videos.